Hey guys, welcome back. I don't do a lot of pool videos, honestly, maybe just one or two, but I think this is a really important one, and it was something I just got back from traveling for several weeks, and noticed that there's a little bit of algae starting to take hold in the pool, and so I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about my experience with algae and the struggle that I've had in the past, and sort of how my thinking about it has changed as time has gone on. The question that, or the problem that I try to address, the question that I try to answer has really pivoted from, how do I how do I kill the algae that I've got in my pool to, how do I really make the conditions in the pool so that the algae can't grow, the algae can't thrive. And that was such an important, there's a small difference in that statement that I just made, but it's been super important to me and has made a massive difference in how I approach and have success against algae. I just want to, before I get started, I want to tell you guys, this has been a problem over years of something I really struggle with, probably more than anything else in the pool. And I want to walk you through those struggles, why I had those, and sort of why this new approach has made such a difference. So in this video, we're really going to talk about three things. Honestly, we're going to talk about what is algae. We're going to get a better understanding of that so we know what we're working with. We're going to talk about how it grows, why it grows, why does it grow so quickly in your pool? Why does it seem to thrive? And finally, we're going to talk about, how do I get rid of it? But more importantly, how do I get rid of those conditions in my pool and my environment that really let algae thrive? And why do I have such a problem? All right, guys, first things first, let's talk about what is algae exactly? What am I dealing with here? And we're going to, throughout this video, we're going to talk a little bit of science. We're going to talk a little bit of biology and chemistry. I know I don't want to go there either. So I'll try to keep this super high level because I don't like it getting very complicated, and I don't think it has to. But let's talk algae first. What is it? Algae is really just a classification of organisms, microscopic organisms. They live in lakes, they live in rivers, they live in ponds. Yes, they're in your pool. They turn water green, they turn it cloudy, they can leave black areas on surfaces or yellow areas. And algae really thrives in pool conditions that are unbalanced. And we're going to talk about more in depth, particularly one chemical that is unbalanced that really lets it thrive. But one of the most important things when we're talking about algae is to tell you that it comes from spores. It's not like algae just appears in your pool just because it wants to grow there. Algae comes from spores, and they're everywhere. Algae spores are everywhere. And that's why it's so important not to necessarily think about getting rid of algae, because algae spores are everywhere. They're in the air, they're in the water, they're on you, they're on every single surface. So my point in saying that, they're always going to be in your pool. You're never going to get rid of algae spores. And when the conditions are favorable in lakes or rivers or in your pool, they can really quickly multiply and they can thrive when those conditions are favorable. So that's a little bit of background on what is algae. Now, next, let's talk a little bit about why does it grow and why does it seem to thrive so much in your pool. So I mentioned before that it really does well in environments with unbalanced chemicals. And so why is that important? So the really important thing that I want you guys to know is, what does algae feed on? What is its food source? And that word is phosphates. In other words, algae needs phosphates to survive. So if we take that a step further, high phosphate levels, whether it's in your pool or, like I said, in a river or a lake, that really can promote really quick and rapid algae growth. So when those spores that I mentioned, those algae spores that are everywhere, they're all around you, when those get in those water areas like your pool and there's high levels of phosphates in there, they've got that food source and they can really grow. So if you've got a pool like mine, and I'll tell you, this was a real struggle, our pool was packed full of phosphates. And so when those algae spores get in that pool, they've just got like a buffet. Like they can just eat and eat and eat, and they're going to thrive on that food source. So we've talked about algae. We've talked about how they grow through phosphates, but let's talk about what are phosphates, right? And this is where we get into a little more science. We get into a little bit more chemistry. But phosphates are really just organic compounds. They're organic chemical compounds that contain phosphorus. And so if you think about where that comes from You're going to get phosphates that come from things like leaves. If you've got a lot of trees around your pool, if you're always seeing leaves in your water, if you mow the grass, if you get grass clippings in your pool, that's a really high area for phosphates. If you use a lot of fertilizers, potentially runoff, and this is more for lakes and rivers, but if you get that runoff from fertilizers, that can add a lot of phosphates into your water. And yes, even people, honestly, there's phosphates on your skin, on your body. If you have a lot of swimmers, if your pool is very active in the summer, that's another way that phosphates can get in your water. So phosphates are really important to understand when learning about algae. So we've talked about what algae is. We've talked about how it grows through consumption of phosphates. We talked a little bit about what are phosphates. So why is this such a struggle? Why, and I'll speak from personal experience, why did I have so much trouble for so many years getting rid of algae? And why is that a problem if there's such an industry built around killing algae? And I'll tell you, if you go into any pool store, if you go into Amazon and search for algae, you are going to get bombarded with just countless solutions and chemicals that are algaecides. And look, I can admire the mission they're on. They target the algae, they're trying to kill algae in your pool, but I think that approach is misguided. What I want you guys to know is that any chemical out there, any solution out there that is trying, I don't want to say all, but the ones that I've run across that are trying to kill algae are really trying to address the symptom. They're not trying to address the cause, right? Which is high phosphate levels. So if you put an algaecide in your pool, and I'm going to show you in a little bit just, an algaecide that I used to use versus what I'm using now to actually target the phosphates. But if you put an algaecide in your pool, it does target the algae, absolutely, right? And there's some good in that, right? Where it's gonna go in there, it's gonna attack the algae, it's gonna kill it. The algae will hopefully die. You will vacuum it up, and your pool won't have algae. And that's the approach that I used for years and years, right? To varying degrees of success. I could never figure out, once I would get rid of the algae, which was very difficult on its own, oftentimes very quickly, the algae would just come back. And I kept thinking to myself, why is this happening? I'm getting rid of the algae. I don't understand. Why do I keep getting algae? And the problem was I kept attacking the symptom. I kept trying to get rid of the algae instead of trying to address the underlying issue, which was targeting the phosphates and getting rid of the phosphates. So that, if there's one takeaway from this video, if there's something more important than killing algae, it's that. I really want you to be thinking not about how do I kill algae. I want you guys to be thinking about how do I address those conditions, which are typically high phosphate levels, that allow algae to grow and thrive and do so well over the course of my pool season. So we're going to walk to the pool now. I want to show you what I used to use in terms of an algaecide, and I want to show you what I use now in terms of a phosphate remover and why that has made such a difference for me in my pool. So let's head out to the pool for just a minute. All right, guys, we're back out at the pool here, and I showed you earlier a little bit of video from the water itself, where, starting to see algae, in the corners, those areas starting to take a hold. But I want to show you here an algaecide on the left. And look, first of all, I'm not sponsored by any of these companies. These are just products that I use and have used that I just want to give you an example. So this is not any sort of product placement. There's a lot of options for both algaecides and for phosphates removers. But in the past, I always went to this. I always went to an algaecide. If I saw algae in the pool, I immediately said, I got to kill the algae. I got to raise the chlorine. I got to look at all these things. Surely I don't have enough chlorine. I got to kill the algae. And that's why I would focus on the algaecide. But once I started thinking differently about how do I get rid of the algae, and how do I get rid of the food source? How do I get rid of those conditions that let those algae spores really thrive? I started searching for a phosphate remover. Now I use this Orenda PR 10,000. I will tell you, it works pretty well for me. I'm really happy with it. There's a lot of these out there. Go on Amazon or a pool shop and you can find these things. But I would encourage you, what this does when it goes in the water, it attacks the phosphates. It doesn't do anything about attacking algae. What it's doing is it's going in there and removing those phosphates from your pool so that that algae doesn't have a food source. And so that's why I really think a lot of the marketing and the pool literature and the advice is just misguided out there, because it's focused on this right? When it really needs to be focused on this. And I will tell you, when I first started using a phosphate remover, you know, I had to put this in the pool quite a bit, probably every week for the first month or so, just because the phosphate levels were so high and it took time to get those down to a level where the algae couldn't grow. Once you get to that point, once you get the phosphates down, I'm really more in maintenance mode now, where I put this in about once a month in my pool, just to make sure the phosphate levels stay in check. Like I said, I've got a lot of trees and leaves, lots of organic matter, so I'm very susceptible to phosphate levels that can rise very, very quickly. Now, I've been out of town, I've been traveling a lot. I had a feeling when I got back I would see a little bit of this problem, and I did. All right, my GoPro just died on me because it said it was getting too hot. But the last thing I wanted to show you guys, I was talking about the phosphate remover, and I actually want to show you guys an example. I'm going to put this in the water. I have a feeling I've got phosphates in there, and if I put this solution in there, and what it's going to do, it's going to react with the phosphates. So what should happen if there's phosphates, I'll see some cloudiness as it reacts with the phosphates in the water. So I'm going to pour this in, let you guys see what happened. I'm going to try, I don't know if you can see this very well on the camera, but we're just going to kind of drizzle this in, walking along the edge here. I don't want to kind of power it in. And it takes a minute. It takes a minute for the reaction to happen. You know, while this is happening, and you can actually already see a little bit. You can see the cloudiness starting to form in the water. I'm going to walk around to the other side, maybe so I can get a little better view for you guys about what's happening. But if there's, so here we go. I've put the phosphate remover on the other side as well. You can see just the extreme cloudiness all over the place. So what this tells me is I've got high phosphate levels in my pool, and that's me where I have actively tried to keep phosphates down. So if you're like me, I'm just very susceptible to these high phosphate levels. And what that tells me is I've got an environment in the pool that when these algae spores get in here, which they're inevitably going to do all the time, I've got an environment where they can grow and they can thrive. And that's why I'm seeing the algae in some of the corners. And so this is going to address that. This is going to knock out that food source for the algae. It might take it, for where I am, it might take a couple of applications, but I'm confident that this is the approach that longer term really will deter algae, rather than going in here trying to kill the algae, but really not addressing the cause of what's allowing the algae to thrive. So anyway, guys, I hope this helps you out. Look, again, the biggest takeaway here, shift that mindset and shift that question from how do I kill the algae to how do I address those conditions? How do I address the phosphates that are allowing the algae spores to grow and thrive and do so well in my pool? I think if you do that, I think you're going to have some more success. You're going to spend a lot less money on constantly buying algaecides, and you're just going to be much more happy with the condition of your pool. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying the summer. I know it's hot. Get in that pool and enjoy it. And I really hope this video helps you out. Anyways, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.